Welcome to Safe Simple Sound, where we make financial planning safe, simple, and sound. I'm Alex, your host, joined by Sam, our financial planning expert, and Taylor, who asks the questions you might have on your mind. Together, we break down complex financial topics into clear, actionable insights. We use AI-enhanced voices to deliver consistent, high-quality content while keeping our focus on what matters most, helping you build a secure financial future using our secured approach. In each episode, I'll guide our discussion, Sam will provide expert analysis, and Taylor will make sure we explain everything in plain English. Whether you're just starting your financial journey or planning for retirement, we're here to help you make informed decisions with confidence. Before we begin, a quick note. This podcast is for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or professional advice. All financial decisions should consider your personal circumstances, goals, risk tolerance, and specific situation. Any financial examples, calculations, or strategies discussed are for illustrative purposes only. Market conditions change constantly, and past performance doesn't guarantee future results. For the most current information, please visit reliable financial websites or consult official sources. For personalized guidance aligned with our Safe Simple Sound approach, you can reach out to us at safesimplesound.com/contact. Let's begin our journey to financial security together. Today, we're diving deep into protecting your wealth, specifically during your peak earning years, those crucial years between 45 and 54. Today's episode is inspired by an insightful article titled Protecting Growing Wealth: Security Strategies for Peak Earning Years, which really resonated with our core belief here at Safe Simple Sound, to seize financial control and develop wealth and a lasting legacy. This article highlights the interesting paradox that as our wealth grows more complex, we often try to simplify our security approach, sometimes to our detriment. It also emphasizes the unique challenges faced by the security bridge generation, those of us juggling our own finances while also supporting both aging parents and adult children. So to navigate these complexities, we've structured this episode into 4 key segments. First, we'll tackle the multi-generational security challenge, exploring scenarios like the sandwich generation squeeze and the ever-important digital inheritance dilemma. Then we'll shift our focus to investment account security evolution, examining how to stay ahead of sophisticated phishing attacks and mitigate the fallout from potential data breaches, aligning perfectly with our belief in creating a financial safety net. Next, we'll delve into business wealth protection, discussing the risks of insider threats and the devastating impact of cyberattacks on businesses, echoing our focus on understanding financial choices. Finally, we'll unpack the psychology of wealth security, exploring the control illusion and legacy anxiety, and how these biases can impact our financial decisions, reminding us to embrace financial flexibility. Get ready for an information-packed episode full of actionable advice designed to help you build a robust security framework that truly protects the wealth you've worked so hard to achieve. Let's dive in. Many people in their 40s and 50s find themselves in what we call the sandwich generation squeeze. Imagine a couple, let's call them Sarah and David, both around 50. They're juggling their own investment portfolios, helping Sarah's aging parents with medical bills and estate planning, and simultaneously guiding their adult children through student loans and the daunting task of buying their first homes. This is a complex financial web, and the security risks are significant. Sam, what are some of the immediate challenges you see in a scenario like this? Our first question is about secure information sharing. How can Sarah and David securely share financial information and access with their family members while protecting themselves from fraud?
That's a great starting point, Alex. The article mentions secure access protocols, and that's exactly what they need. Think of it like a tiered system. They wouldn't give their children the keys to the family safe, right? Similarly, they shouldn't give everyone full access to all their financial accounts. Perhaps the children need access to a joint account for household expenses, while the parents need access to a specific healthcare account. This segmentation limits the damage if one account is compromised.
So if I understand correctly, it's about compartmentalizing access. This reminds me of what we talked about with password managers, using different strong passwords for each account. But how do you practically implement this tiered system Sam mentioned?
Many banks and financial institutions offer varying levels of authorized access. For instance, you can grant someone view only access or limit their ability to make transactions above a certain amount. There are also secure document sharing platforms that allow controlled access to sensitive information, like estate planning documents.
Our second question addresses the diverse financial needs of each generation. What tools and strategies can they use to manage these effectively?
This feels overwhelming. How can Sarah and David keep track of everything, from their own investments to their parents' medical bills and their children's student loans? I can barely manage my own budget.
It's a lot, but manageable with the right tools. Budgeting apps can help track expenses across multiple categories. Some even allow for shared access, so Sarah and David can track their own finances while also monitoring shared expenses with their children or parents. For more complex situations, financial advisors can provide consolidated wealth management services.
And our third question touches on the legal and ethical considerations. What are the potential legal and ethical implications of managing finances for multiple generations, Sam?
Excellent point, Alex. Power of attorney is a key legal document to consider. This allows someone to legally act on behalf of another person, especially important if a parent becomes incapacitated. Ethically, transparency and open communication are crucial. Everyone involved needs to understand the financial arrangements and their roles within them.
So we've covered secure information sharing, managing diverse financial needs, and the legal and ethical aspects. Taylor, any final thoughts?
I think the tiered access idea is really important, and those budgeting apps sound helpful. The legal and ethical side is something I hadn't considered much before, so that's definitely a takeaway for me.
Absolutely. A family financial communication plan is key and something everyone should consider. Explore secure document sharing platforms and talk to a financial advisor if you're feeling overwhelmed. Remember, open communication and proactive planning are essential for navigating the multi-generational security challenge. But what happens when a member of that sandwich generation is suddenly gone? We deal with this in our next scenario. We call this scenario digital inheritance dilemma. Imagine a 48-year-old entrepreneur at the peak of their career unexpectedly passes away. They leave behind not just physical assets, but a complex digital estate: cryptocurrency holdings, online businesses, social media accounts, subscription services, the list goes on. This raises critical questions about securing and transferring these digital assets. Sam, this is an area where you have a lot of expertise. Let's start with a fundamental question. How can individuals ensure their digital assets are securely transferred to their beneficiaries?
It all begins with planning. Just as you have a will for physical assets, you need a plan for your digital life. This includes documenting all your digital assets, from bank accounts and investment platforms to social media profiles and online businesses, along with login credentials and instructions for access. A password manager can be a lifesaver here, especially one with a secure sharing feature.
So, if I understand correctly, we're talking about creating an inventory of everything digital, right? And making sure someone we trust has access to it. This reminds me of what we discussed about secure document sharing in the last scenario, only now it's even more critical. But what if the passwords are stored on a device that's locked?
Excellent point, Taylor. That's why it's important to have a designated individual with legal authority to access your devices, potentially through a provision in your will or a separate digital estate plan. Some states even have legislation addressing this specifically.
Which brings us to the next point. What are the legal and practical challenges of managing digital inheritance?
Legally, access to digital assets after death can be a gray area. Laws are still catching up with technology. Practically, companies have different policies regarding access to deceased users' accounts. Some require court orders, others accept death certificates and designated beneficiary forms. This is where professional legal advice is invaluable.
So it's not as simple as just handing over a list of passwords. There's a legal component too. This feels overwhelming.
It can be, which is why we're talking about it. The key is to start the process early. Think of it like any other aspect of estate planning. And finally, Sam, how can families protect themselves from fraud and identity theft after the loss of a loved one?
Immediately securing the deceased's devices and online accounts is crucial. Notify banks, credit bureaus, and social media platforms. Monitor accounts for suspicious activity, and be wary of phishing scams targeting grieving family members. These scammers are sadly quite common.
So, like someone pretending to be a bank or a social media platform asking for login details. That's awful.
Exactly. Be incredibly vigilant during this vulnerable time. Our reference article, Protecting Growing Wealth, touches on this, highlighting the importance of secure communication channels and vigilance against fraud, especially during life transitions.
So, to recap, we talked about the importance of documenting digital assets, understanding the legal complexities of digital inheritance, and protecting against fraud. Sam highlighted the need for a digital estate plan similar to a will for physical assets. This plan should include an inventory of digital assets, access instructions, and designated beneficiaries.
This discussion really emphasized the importance of being proactive rather than reactive. It's not something to put off until later.
Absolutely, Taylor. So, listeners, our call to action today is simple but critical. Develop a digital estate plan and discuss it with your family and legal advisors. This will not only protect your digital legacy, but also provide your loved ones with peace of mind during a difficult time. Now, while we're on the subject of security, let's shift our focus to a growing threat for everyone, regardless of age: sophisticated phishing attacks. Taylor, have you ever received an email that looked suspiciously like it came from your bank? Our next scenario is the sophisticated phishing attack. Sarah, in our scenario, believed she was tech savvy. She had strong passwords, but she clicked a link in what appeared to be a legitimate email from her financial institution. This led her to a convincing fake website that mirrored her bank's login page. She entered her credentials, unknowingly handing them over to scammers. This, unfortunately, gave the criminals access to her accounts. This story, though fictional, represents a very real and growing threat. So, Sam, how can investors protect themselves from these increasingly sophisticated phishing and social engineering attacks?
These attacks are becoming incredibly sophisticated, mimicking legitimate communications almost perfectly. One key defense is multi-factor authentication. This means that even if someone gets your password, they'll need another factor, like a code sent to your phone or a fingerprint scan, to access your account.
So, if I understand correctly, even if they trick me into giving up my password, they still can't get in without that second step. That's reassuring.
Exactly. Think of it like a two-key system to a vault. Even if they pick one lock, they still need the other.
Beyond multi-factor authentication, what are other best practices for securing investment accounts and personal financial information?
Regularly reviewing account statements is crucial. Look for any unusual activity. Set up transaction alerts. If a large sum is withdrawn, you'll be notified immediately. Also, be wary of unsolicited communication. Financial institutions rarely ask for sensitive information via email or phone.
This reminds me of what we discussed about digital inheritance. Having a secure inventory of all your accounts and communication channels is helpful not only for your beneficiaries, but also for your own security monitoring.
Precisely. Knowing where your assets are and how they're accessed is fundamental to protecting them.
What steps should investors take if they do suspect their accounts have been compromised?
Immediate action is key. Contact your financial institution immediately to freeze your accounts. Change your passwords across all financial platforms, and consider placing a fraud alert or credit freeze with the credit bureaus. These steps can help limit the damage.
That's a good point. It's not just about reacting after the fact, but also actively monitoring. Regularly checking credit reports, for instance, can alert you to suspicious activity early on.
Exactly, Taylor. Proactive monitoring is essential. Think of it like regular health checkups for your finances. So let's recap. Multi-factor authentication, regular account monitoring, and swift action if you suspect a compromise are crucial for protecting your investments. Remember, scammers are getting smarter, so staying informed and proactive is your best defense. We urge all our listeners to implement multi factor authentication on all your financial accounts and review your account security settings regularly. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control of your financial security today. Now, even with the best individual security practices, we can't ignore the risks associated with the institutions holding our assets. Next, we'll discuss the potential fallout from data breaches and how to mitigate those risks. We'll discuss the data breach fallout scenario now. Imagine a major investment platform, one you might even use, experiences a significant data breach. Suddenly, the personal and financial information of thousands of users, including names, addresses, social security numbers, even account details, is exposed. This isn't a hypothetical situation. These breaches happen. So, Sam, how can investors minimize the risk of data breaches impacting their financial well-being, even if they aren't directly targeted?
Minimizing risk in a data breach landscape requires a multi-layered approach. Think of it like securing a house. You wouldn't just rely on a single lock. You'd have strong doors, windows, maybe an alarm system. Similarly, with your finances, you need layers of protection. Strong, unique passwords are the foundation, but that's just the start. Multi-factor authentication, which adds an extra layer of verification beyond just your password, is crucial. This might involve a code sent to your phone or email, or even biometric verification, like a fingerprint. Limiting access by setting IP restrictions, meaning only devices from your usual locations can access your accounts, adds another layer.
So, if I understand correctly, even if my password gets stolen in a breach, MFA would make it much harder for someone to access my account.
Exactly, they'd need your password and access to your phone, email, or fingerprint. This makes it exponentially harder for hackers.
That's a great point, Sam. And Taylor, your question brings us to another critical point. What steps should investors take if their information is compromised in a data breach, even with those precautions?
This reminds me of what we discussed earlier about credit monitoring. Is that something I should be doing proactively, even before a breach?
Absolutely. Regularly monitoring your credit reports from all 3 major credit bureaus is essential. This allows you to spot any unusual activity, like new accounts opened in your name or sudden changes to your credit score, which can be early indicators of identity theft. Consider identity theft protection services. They can offer more comprehensive monitoring and assistance with remediation if your identity is stolen. Also, contact your financial institutions immediately if you suspect a breach. They can help you freeze your accounts and take further steps to protect your funds.
Now, Sam, let's consider the bigger picture. What are the long-term implications of these data breaches for investor trust and security, beyond the immediate impact on individuals?
Data breaches erode trust, not just in the specific platform that was breached, but in the entire financial system. They can lead to increased regulatory scrutiny, higher insurance costs for both companies and individuals, and even slower adoption of new technologies as people become more wary of sharing their data. It's a ripple effect.
So to recap, we've talked about minimizing risk through multi-factor authentication and IP restrictions, taking action if your information is compromised by monitoring your credit and contacting financial institutions, and the broader impact of breaches on investor trust and the financial landscape. This information is valuable for everyone, regardless of their investment portfolio size. We encourage you to take action. Monitor your credit reports regularly and seriously consider identity theft protection services. Your financial peace of mind is worth it. Sometimes the threat comes from within. That's what we'll discuss next. Let's shift our focus to the insider threat scenario. Imagine this: a disgruntled employee at a small business, someone with access to sensitive financial information, decides to embezzle funds. This scenario, unfortunately, isn't just a hypothetical. It happens more often than you might think. This is what we're calling the insider threat. Taylor, this situation brings to mind a few crucial questions. First, how can businesses protect themselves from these insider threats and fraud in general?
That's a scary thought, Alex. It makes me think about how much trust we place in our employees, especially in smaller businesses where everyone wears multiple hats. I guess a good starting point would be robust background checks during the hiring process, right? But what else can be done beyond that initial screening?
Taylor, You're absolutely right to start with background checks. They're a fundamental part of mitigating insider risk. However, it's not a foolproof solution. Someone's circumstances can change after they're hired. Think financial pressures, personal grievances, or even external influences like gambling debts. That's where internal security controls come into play. Think of it like layers of protection. One layer might be restricting access to sensitive financial information based on job roles. Another could be implementing multi-factor authentication, like we discussed earlier in the context of investment accounts, even for internal systems.
That's a great point, Sam. The layered approach reminds me of what we discussed in the article about securing investment accounts. It's not just one thing, it's a combination of strategies. Taylor, what comes to mind when you hear about restricting access based on job roles? Does that seem practical in all business settings?
Well, in larger corporations, it makes perfect sense. But in a small business where everyone might pitch in on various tasks, it could be more challenging to implement strict access limitations. So if I understand correctly, Sam, you're suggesting even small businesses need to consider these types of controls despite the potential logistical hurdles.
Precisely. The size of the business doesn't diminish the risk. Even in a small team, having clear protocols about who handles finances, who approves transactions, and who has access to certain data is crucial. Think of it like checks and balances. Multiple people involved in financial processes can make it much harder for fraudulent activity to go unnoticed.
Our second question was about best practices for implementing these internal controls and background checks. Sam, any specific examples you can share?
Sure. Think progressively. A simple example is requiring dual authorization for any transaction above a certain threshold. More complex would be implementing activity monitoring software that tracks employee access and actions within financial systems. Then consider penetration testing, where ethical hackers try to exploit vulnerabilities in your system. It's like a fire drill for your security. This helps you find weaknesses before a malicious insider does.
That penetration testing example is powerful. And finally, what steps should businesses take if they suspect an insider threat?
That's a tough one. It must be difficult to balance the need to investigate with the risk of falsely accusing someone. I imagine having clear protocols in place beforehand would be essential.
You're spot on, Taylor. A clear incident response plan is key. This should outline procedures for discreet investigation, evidence preservation, and communication. It should also address legal considerations, ensuring everything is handled according to the law.
So, to recap, protecting your business from insider threats requires a multi-layered approach, just like securing your personal finances. Start with thorough background checks, implement internal controls like access restrictions and multi-factor authentication, and have a clear incident response plan in place. Listeners, review your internal security protocols and consider implementing employee monitoring systems. Don't wait until it's too late. A proactive approach can save your business from significant financial and reputational damage. Now, let's shift our focus outwards to another critical vulnerability for businesses, especially in our increasingly digital world. Our next scenario is the cyberattack crisis. Imagine a mid-sized company humming along, business as usual. Suddenly, their systems lock up. A message flashes across their screens. All their data is encrypted, and they must pay a hefty ransom to regain access. This is the nightmare scenario of a ransomware attack, and it can cripple a business overnight. This is the cyberattack crisis scenario. Sam, starting with the basics, how can businesses protect themselves from these kinds of attacks in the first place?
Cybersecurity is a multi-layered approach. It's not just about having a strong firewall. Think of it like securing your house. You have locks on the doors and windows, but you might also have an alarm system, motion sensors, and maybe even a security camera. Similarly, businesses need a combination of technical safeguards like firewalls and antivirus software, but also employee training, strong password policies, multi-factor authentication, and regular security audits.
So, it's not just about the technology, but also about the human element. That makes sense. This reminds me of social engineering that I read online and how easily people can be tricked into giving up sensitive information.
Exactly, Taylor. Education is key. Now, Sam, Let's say, despite best efforts, a company is hit with ransomware. What's the role of disaster recovery planning and cyber liability insurance?
Disaster recovery planning is your backup plan. Imagine having a spare key hidden somewhere safe if you get locked out of your house. Disaster recovery is like that spare key, but for your entire business. It involves having backups of all critical data, offsite and regularly updated, so you can restore your systems if they're compromised. Cyber liability insurance, on the other hand, helps cover the financial fallout of an attack, the ransom payment if you choose to pay, legal fees, data recovery costs, and even potential regulatory fines. It can be a lifesaver.
So if I understand correctly, disaster recovery helps you get back on your feet operationally, while cyber liability insurance helps you manage the financial burden.
Precisely, they work hand in hand.
That's a great clarification. Now, let's say the worst happens and a business is actually targeted by a cyber attack. What are the immediate steps they should take, Sam?
First, isolate the affected systems. Contain the damage like you would a fire. Then, immediately contact your cybersecurity team or a specialized incident response firm. They're the experts in this kind of situation and can help you navigate the complex process of investigating the attack, containing it, and restoring your systems. Document everything meticulously. This documentation will be crucial for insurance claims and potential legal action. And of course, notify law enforcement if necessary.
It sounds overwhelming. The article we discussed earlier, Protecting Growing Wealth, touched on business wealth protection, but didn't get into this level of detail. It's almost like a separate emergency preparedness plan specifically for cyber attacks.
Absolutely, Taylor. This is where that integrated wealth security concept from the article comes into play. Cybersecurity is a critical aspect of protecting your business, which is often intertwined with personal wealth, especially for business owners. So to recap, protecting your business from cyber attacks involves a multi-layered approach. Strong technical defenses, employee education, disaster recovery planning, and cyber liability insurance. If you are targeted, isolate the affected systems, contact experts, document everything, and notify law enforcement if needed.
It's clear that being prepared is key. This has given me a lot to think about for my own small business.
And that's exactly the goal, Taylor. Listeners, take action. Develop a comprehensive cybersecurity plan and invest in cyber liability insurance. Don't wait until it's too late. We've talked about the external threats businesses face, but now let's turn inwards and explore the psychological factors that can make individuals vulnerable. Our next scenario, the control illusion, is a psychological hurdle that can impact anyone, regardless of family structure. Imagine someone who's worked incredibly hard, built significant wealth, and believes that their financial success equates to absolute security. They might think, "I've made it, I'm safe now," and neglect crucial security precautions. This overconfidence, this control illusion, can leave them surprisingly vulnerable to fraud and other risks. This is what our scenario explores. Sam, in your experience, how can individuals overcome this illusion of control and develop a more realistic approach to security?
Wealth can certainly offer a sense of security, Alex, but it's not a security system in itself. Overcoming the control illusion starts with acknowledging that vulnerability exists for everyone, regardless of net worth. Think of it like a strong castle. Even with thick walls, you still need guards, a drawbridge, and a watchful eye. Wealth is the castle, but it needs active security measures.
So even if someone has a top-of-the-line alarm system for their home, they shouldn't leave the front door unlocked.
Precisely, Taylor. A multi-layered approach is essential. It's not about living in fear, but about acknowledging potential threats and mitigating them proactively.
That's a great analogy, Sam. Taylor, what do you think are some of the psychological factors that influence security decision-making, especially when wealth is involved?
Well, I think pride might be a factor. People might be hesitant to admit they need help or show vulnerability. This reminds me of what we discussed about the privacy paradox, the desire to display success while maintaining security. It's almost like a conflict, isn't it?
Absolutely. The reference article mentions legacy anxiety too, Alex. The desire to protect one's legacy can sometimes lead to shortcuts in security if someone feels overwhelmed by the complexity of it all. They may try to simplify things too much, opting for convenience over robustness.
That's a critical point, Sam. The article highlights how complexity aversion can lead to inadequate security measures. So, how do we cultivate a healthy balance between trust and vigilance, especially when working with financial advisors and other professionals?
Trust is crucial, but blind trust is dangerous. Start by verifying the credentials and reputation of any advisor you work with. Then, ask questions, lots of them. Don't be afraid to challenge their recommendations and understand the logic behind their strategies. This active engagement is a form of vigilance that protects you without undermining a healthy working relationship.
So, if I understand correctly, it's about finding advisors who welcome questions and transparency rather than seeing it as a challenge.
Exactly. A good advisor will value your engagement and see it as a sign that you're taking your financial security seriously.
So, to recap, overcoming the control illusion requires acknowledging vulnerability, implementing a multi layered security approach, addressing underlying psychological factors like pride and legacy anxiety, and finding a balance between trusting your advisors and maintaining vigilant oversight of your finances. Listeners, wealth doesn't automatically equal security. Seek professional advice and develop a comprehensive security plan that addresses your specific needs. Don't let the control illusion leave you vulnerable. But what happens when that control we think we have needs to be, well, transferred? That's what we'll discuss next. Our next scenario is another common psychological challenge related to wealth: the legacy anxiety. Imagine a successful entrepreneur, someone who's built a thriving business and accumulated significant wealth. They've reached a point where they're thinking about the future, about passing on their legacy to their children. But the thought of this transfer, of ensuring their hard earned wealth is protected and used wisely, can trigger a whole new set of anxieties. This is what we're diving into today: the emotional and practical complexities of securing your legacy. Sam, Taylor, are you ready to explore this?
Definitely, Alex. This is something I've thought about, even though I'm not quite at the entrepreneur stage yet. Knowing how to protect what you build for future generations is important at any stage, right?
Absolutely, Taylor. And as the article mentioned, it's especially pertinent for those in their peak earning years, typically between 45 and 54. They often have the most complex financial situations and the highest stakes.
Exactly. So let's start with a fundamental question. How can individuals address these legacy anxieties and ensure their wealth is transferred securely? Sam, what are your initial thoughts?
Addressing legacy anxiety starts with acknowledging it. It's a perfectly normal feeling. Then, taking concrete steps towards planning is crucial. This involves open communication with your family and, critically, seeking professional guidance from estate planning attorneys and financial advisors.
So, if I understand correctly, the first step is acknowledging the anxiety and not just brushing it aside. That makes sense. Acknowledging the problem is the first step to solving it. Then, bringing in professionals seems crucial here.
Precisely. You wouldn't perform surgery on yourself, would you? Similarly, you shouldn't navigate complex estate planning alone. Which brings us to our next question. What are the key considerations for estate planning and legacy protection?
Key considerations include things like wills, trusts, and beneficiary designations. These are the foundational documents, but it also extends to things like digital asset management, passwords, online accounts, cryptocurrency, and even considerations for business succession if applicable. It's a holistic view of your assets and how they are managed and transferred.
Digital assets. That's a great point. We live so much of our lives online now. How do you even begin to organize and protect that for your heirs?
That's a growing concern. But essentially, it requires creating a secure inventory of your digital assets and designating who controls and accesses them. Think of it as an extension of your traditional estate plan.
Excellent point, Sam. And finally, how can individuals involve their families in the wealth transfer process?
Open and honest communication is paramount. It's not just about the technicalities of the transfer, but also the values and intentions behind it. Explain your decisions to your family, ensure they understand the plan, and prepare them to manage the wealth responsibly. This mitigates misunderstandings and potential conflicts down the line.
So it's not just about the what, but also the why. That's important for maintaining family harmony and ensuring the legacy is truly understood.
Exactly. Transparency is key. To recap, we've discussed the anxieties surrounding legacy planning, the importance of seeking professional guidance, key considerations for estate planning, and involving your family in the process. Remember, this isn't about eliminating anxiety altogether, but about managing it through proactive planning and open communication. Your next step: consult with an estate planning attorney and develop a comprehensive legacy plan. Don't wait for anxiety to take hold. Take control of your legacy today. And there you have it, another deep dive into the world of financial security here on Safe, Simple, Sound. We explored the critical landscape of protecting your wealth during your peak earning years, inspired by the article, Protecting Growing Wealth: Security Strategies for Peak Earning Years. We discussed the very real multi-generational security challenge, the evolution of investment account security, the critical need for business wealth protection, and the often overlooked psychology of wealth security. Remember, just as your wealth becomes more complex, so too should your security approach. Don't fall into the trap of oversimplification. I think the scenarios about the sandwich generation squeeze and the digital inheritance dilemma really highlighted how crucial planning and open communication are for families at this stage. It's all part of seizing financial control and developing that lasting legacy we talked about at the beginning of the episode. Thank you for joining us today on Safe, Simple, Sound. Check out the show notes for all mentioned resources. Remember, just like our mascot Shelby the tortoise, the path to financial security is about making steady, thoughtful progress. If you found value in this episode, please leave a review and share it with someone looking to make their financial journey safer, simpler, and sounder. Until next time, this is Alex, along with Sam and Taylor, wishing you success on your secured path to financial freedom.